I did my special topics investigation on the visual thinking strategies curriculum and specifically on watching videos of teachers using this curriculum in their classrooms. So I purchased the visual thinking strategies curriculum from the website. It's vtshome.org. And on the website, once you purchase the curriculum, you get lessons for VTS, teacher tips, they have some articles you can read, and then they have videos as a resource. So these are some videos that pop up on the screen for people who have purchased the curriculum. If you haven't purchased the curriculum though, you can't actually see the videos. So that's why I kind of took a screenshot of just like my view and what I was able to check out on my screen. So for my project, I wanted to watch at least 5 videos of visual thinking strategies happening in real classrooms. So I watched videos from 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 12th grade. And what I thought was really interesting was that some of the videos were only like 8 minutes long, while others went all the way into like 25 minutes. So that was really interesting to me because my understanding was that it was like a 10 to 15-minute lesson from what I've read in the curriculum. So it was cool to see that it can go shorter or longer. Basically, VTS has the 6 steps right here. So you show the image to your children, you have them silently look, then you ask your 3 questions. So the 3 questions are, what's going on in this picture? What do you see that makes you say that? And what more can we find? So once you've asked these questions, it kind of just goes in a loop of number 2 and 3. Essentially, you ask, okay, what's going on in this picture? Well, what do you see that makes you say that? What more can we find that helps prove that that's happening? And when kids are talking, you kind of point out what they're seeing and then also paraphrase what they're saying. And it was really cool to watch the 1st and 2nd grade videos because the teachers seemed to paraphrase a lot, and that's because the kids would kind of just keep talking and talking and talking, and they'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a great thing that you're saying. So I'm seeing that, you found that this bear is in the water, and you're thinking that it might be a lake because there's lily pads. Great. So they paraphrased like the big long thing that the kid had said, which I'm sure all of us have seen in our own classrooms. And then at the end, the teachers would always thank their students for giving their narratives and giving their explanations, and it just kind of ended really nicely. Every single one of them, the video kind of ended by them thanking them and walking away. It wasn't like they ever actually gave the children the answers or explained what they should have seen, and I really appreciated that because I don't really know if there are typical answers to what you should see in art, but I know that sometimes teachers have an idea of what they'd like their students to see, so it was cool that it was such an open-ended conversation. So I also kind of wanted to look at vocab, especially in these videos, and like I had said, some of the conversations get super lengthy. So the few things I did notice was the teachers would always say, okay, so Max, you agree with Haley, or oh, I disagree with what Jenna said because. So even the 1st graders were using this vocabulary. So instead of like a little girl raising her hand and being like, oh, Max is wrong, she would say, I disagree with Max because I see this. So then the teacher would ask, what's your evidence? And the kids would explain. So I put this picture on here because this was from a 1st grade discussion, and I thought it was kind of a strange picture, but it was a really cool conversation because the kids had such different ideas, and they were very respectful of all the different ideas. So like one child had said, oh, this big guy right here looks like Santa Claus. And then this other girl was like, well, this is the only girl in the picture because the rest are men. And the teacher was just like, oh, well, why do you think that? So you're thinking this. What evidence do you see? And she was talking about how these are slippers and flowers. But then one of the boys brought up that there's flowers over here too, so maybe that person was a woman. And I kind of realized that depending on the picture, the teacher has a lot of opportunity to give new vocabulary. So especially here where they're talking about gender, they kept saying, oh, this is a boy, this is a girl, this is a man, this is a woman. And the teacher was like, oh, so you're thinking that their gender could be this. You're thinking that this could be who they are. And interesting because none of the kids actually, picked up and used the word gender, but the teacher was trying to introduce that new vocabulary, and she just kept repeating it. So I thought that was really cool. As far as classroom engagement goes, I was a little bit worried about this in my own classroom, and I still am for when I do try to use some of these things in the fall. But the teacher kept asking questions of the kids like, all right, well, who agrees with what Jenny said? Who disagrees and why? And even just those things, I think that the kids, even the really little kids, were super excited to give their opinions. So, if Jenny said, like in that last picture, well, the only girl is this one with the slippers, then there was usually someone who'd be like, well, I disagree with Jenny because of this. And it was really interesting. But the one thing that I did also notice was the lengthy conversations. So there was a fourth grade video I also watched that was just kind of almost painful to watch because the kids just kept going on and on and on, and they weren't really giving any new information. So the teacher, how he handled it was he was like, oh, that is a great idea. We're going to move on, but thank you so much for your input. And I thought that was great because I know sometimes it's really hard to tell kids to stop talking, especially if they think they've got some genius, thing they're trying to tell a teacher or the class. But I thought that was a really cool understanding that he had with his students was that, we have to give everyone time to share at this point. So, let's move on, but thank you for your input. And like I had mentioned before, the classroom engagement, the teachers in all the videos just kept going back to question 2 and 3. So, okay, well, what more can we find in this picture? And what do you see that makes you say that? And I thought, this would probably get old after a while, but especially when the kids would bring up new things like, setting or colors or like gender, like in that last one, it was just like crazy how much more the kids could pull out of what they were seeing in the picture. So I think it was a really great way to get the kids engaged, and it kind of made me feel better about classroom engagement. Like I feel if I do this with my students, it probably would turn more like into a lengthy conversation than being like some awkward thing that we do and no one's talking. So yeah. And then the other two videos I watched, originally I had really wanted to watch some other strategies in the classroom, but I realized that visual thinking strategies is kind of like the only thing out there that I could really find a whole lot for. There were a couple things that there were a couple videos on YouTube, but they were really strange, and I didn't feel like I actually got anything out of them. So instead, I kind of looked up just visual literacy and opinions on it, and I got this really wonderful TED Talk by Brian Kennedy at Dartmouth, and he was explaining the importance of visual literacy and why it needs to be taught in schools. So basically his theory is that, visuals are seen in a process, so we can look at something. Once we look at something, we can actually see it. Once we see it, we can describe it. Once we can describe it, we can analyze what we just described, and then finally we can interpret it. So I loved this because it's kind of like a no-brainer, like, oh yeah, I guess we do that. But Brian was saying, well, how many things do we look at that we don't interpret? And I think that's so true, right? Like, we look at things all the time. I think he had said 90% of what we interpret is visual. But how deep do we actually go into interpreting the things that we look at? And that was kind of his whole point, was that kids need to understand how to do this because it's not a skill in itself. Visual literacy is not a skill, but it uses other skills to form connections. And similarly, this really short video, I don't know if you guys want to take a look, I put the link in there just in case, but really short video from the Toledo Museum of Art, and it was just talking about how critical thinking and visual literacy are completely linked, and how interpreting images in multiple ways is basically what we do when we're thinking critically. And not only that, but it opens up people, and especially children, to new viewpoints and ideas. So I really appreciated both these videos because it kind of gave some background into why teachers should care, into why this is important, and why critical thinking and visual literacy are they really go hand in hand. And those are two things that obviously we want our kids to have. We want them to be critical thinkers in the world, especially outside of school. So I had a couple takeaways and wonderings. My biggest takeaway was that the lessons that I watched looked a lot better in smaller groups. There were a few that were just these huge groups of kids, and kids didn't get a chance to say what they wanted, and it almost looked like they were fighting for time. So I feel like I might teach visual literacy, or VTS, specifically VTS, in a smaller group. And none of the teachers had any sentence frames, even though a couple of them definitely had some language learners. Just by the way they were speaking and the responses that they had, I think they were language learners. That might just be my interpretation. And then the teachers never actually told any of the kids what was going on in the picture, or what the artist intended them to see. So my two questions were, I wonder if I could use sentence frames for ELL kids, or, if those guiding questions would be enough. And then my second question was, how much information can I actually share about this art? So I read some more stuff online. I don't really see anything that says either way if you should or shouldn't tell the kids what's going on in the picture. But especially like if there was a really cool picture and the kids, loved it or wanted to add it to a report, I would hate to not give them the name, or let them know about the artist, or I don't know. It just seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of information about what can actually be said about the picture by the teacher. So that was my last question. And that's it. So hopefully you learned something from my learnings about visual literacy.